The year was 2471, and Earth was no longer the peaceful blue planet it once was. The night sky had turned into a battlefield, filled with burning streaks of light and falling metal from shattered ships. The invasion had begun months earlier, but now it felt like the end was near. The attackers were called the Cathal Dominion, a race of tall, silver-skinned aliens who saw humans as weak creatures living on land they wanted for themselves. They came without warning, their enormous ships blocking out the stars, spreading across the solar system like a shadow that swallowed everything. Mars fell first, then the Luna colonies, and soon after, the outpost near Jupiter went silent. Humanity watched in horror as everything they had built beyond Earth was destroyed. Still, Earth tried to talk to them. The leaders of the United Earth Command sent message after message, pleading for peace, offering friendship and trade. But the Cathal didn't care. They didn't even respond with words, only with fire. The first orbital strike came without warning. Whole cities vanished under beams of plasma that fell from the sky. The oceans boiled where the blasts hit, and the land burned for days. Billions took shelter underground, deep beneath the Earth's crust, while the few surviving ships tried to defend what was left. Among those ships was the Resolute Dawn, the last human flagship still fighting in orbit. Inside that ship stood Captain Aria Voss, a woman who had seen more death than anyone should. Her uniform was torn, her face marked with burns, but her eyes still burned with determination. Around her, the ship groaned under the weight of battle, every wall trembling from distant explosions. The lights flickered, smoke filled the air, and the sound of alarms echoed through the corridors. Her crew worked desperately, trying to keep the shields up while enemy fire pounded against them like a storm that would never end. Her second-in-command approached, his face pale. "Captain," he said softly, "they're demanding our surrender again." Aria didn't turn. She stood before the main viewport, staring at the sight of Earth below, a beautiful wounded world glowing with fire. The cities she once visited were gone, replaced by rivers of molten light. Her heart ached, but her voice stayed steady. "No," she said finally. "They'll get our answer soon enough." Her tone was calm, but everyone on the bridge could feel the quiet rage behind it. They had fought for months, lost millions, and still the aliens wanted them to kneel. But humanity had never been good at surrendering. Outside, the alien fleet moved like a metal storm, hundreds of silver ships shining against the dark. They believed Earth's defenses were broken. They believed humans were finished. Yet, deep within the command centers buried under the surface, something was stirring. Scientists and soldiers whispered of a secret project, a weapon that could turn the tide, a final warning that would make the stars themselves tremble. But for now, the world waited in silence, watching as the battle above continued to rage. Aria stood tall as the bridge shook again. "Status?" she asked, her voice cutting through the noise. "Shields at 20%, came the reply. "Hull breach on Deck 4. We can't hold much longer." She closed her eyes for a brief moment, remembering the faces of the people she was fighting for, the children in shelters, the families praying underground, the countless lives depending on her. She refused to let Earth die without a fight. As another explosion rocked the ship, Aria gripped the console and whispered to herself, "Not yet." Outside, the blue planet still turned, wounded but alive. The stars burned cold around it, and for a moment, it seemed that the whole universe was holding its breath. Earth was on the edge of destruction, but its spirit, fierce, stubborn, unbroken, was about to awaken. The war had begun, and humanity was not done fighting. The Resolute Dawn drifted in the upper layers of Earth's orbit like a wounded animal, its metal skin torn open in several places, leaking trails of fire and debris into the darkness. The war had pushed humanity to its breaking point, but the people on board refused to give up. Every soldier, engineer, and pilot aboard knew that this might be their last fight, yet not one of them spoke of surrender. Their eyes were hollow from exhaustion, but their hearts still burned with a quiet fury. Down below on the surface of Earth, the few surviving cities were covered in smoke and ash. Underground bunkers stretched for miles, filled with families clinging to hope and listening to the faint rumble of distant battles. Humanity was bloodied, broken, and cornered, but not defeated. In secret bases hidden beneath the moon's shadow, teams of scientists and engineers were working day and night, creating something that had been forbidden for generations. They were building weapons that had never been used before, machines of unimaginable power meant only for the last resort. Deep under the Pacific Ocean, in a hidden facility known only to the highest command, a massive reactor pulsed with blinding light. This was Project Leviathan, the Earth's final defense. It was a weapon so powerful that it could bend the laws of energy themselves, capable of turning the planet's magnetic core into a storm of destruction. For decades it had been sealed away, locked behind moral laws and peace treaties. But those rules no longer mattered. The Cathal had left humanity no choice. Captain Arya Voss received a secure transmission from Earth Command while her ship floated above the dark side of the planet. The voice that came through was steady but carried a heavy sadness. "Captain Voss," it said, "this is it. Courtesy ends now." The words hung in the air like thunder. For centuries, humans had taken pride in their diplomacy, in their willingness to talk before fighting, to build alliances instead of empires. They had believed in peace, even when surrounded by stronger and more advanced civilizations. But now peace had been shattered beyond repair. The Cathal had not just attacked their cities, they had mocked their kindness, burned their colonies, and killed their children. Arya stood silent after the message ended, her eyes fixed on the glowing arc of Earth below. The time for restraint was over. She turned to her bridge crew, their faces lit by the red emergency lights. "Prepare the Helios cannon," she said. Her voice was calm, but her heart was racing. The crew froze for a moment, staring at her. The Helios was not just another weapon. It was humanity's first and last attempt at harnessing the power of the sun itself. It drew raw energy from solar flares and focused it into a beam capable of slicing through entire fleets. It had been tested only once in secret decades ago. To use it now meant crossing a line that could not be uncrossed. But Arya didn't hesitate. The crew, trusting her completely, obeyed her orders and began the long process of charging the weapon. Outside, the alien ships regrouped in orbit. Hundreds of them shimmered in the sunlight, moving with cold precision. They were confident, almost arrogant. They believed they had already won. Their sensors detected the Resolute Dawn's damaged systems and concluded it was no threat. They were wrong. In the depths of space, power began to build inside the human ship. The Helios cannon hummed softly at first, then roared like a beast awakening from its sleep. The ship trembled as energy filled its core, ready to unleash hell itself. Arya gripped the command rail and whispered, "Let's show them what Earth is made of." Her crew straightened, fear turning into resolve. Humanity had been pushed into a corner, but that corner was about to explode with fire. For too long, they had tried to be kind, to be civil, to be courteous to those who did not deserve it. Now they were done pretending. The moment had come for Earth to remind the stars why humanity was never meant to be underestimated. And as the ship aimed its weapon at the heart of the alien fleet, silence filled the bridge. An electric, terrible silence before the storm. When the first light of dawn touched the Earth, it was not sunlight that brightened the sky, but the fire of battle. The human fleet that had been hiding for weeks among asteroid fields, derelict stations, and the dark shadows of the moon finally emerged. Thousands of ships of every shape and size roared to life. Military cruisers, refitted mining vessels, and even cargo haulers armed with homemade weapons. Humanity had gathered every last piece of strength it had left. From the Resolute Dawn, Captain Arya Voss led the charge. Her voice echoed through the comms, reaching every ship and every soldier. For every city they burned, for every life they took, today we answer. The fleet responded with a single thunderous roar as engines flared and ships lunged forward into the stars. The darkness of space turned into a storm of light. The Cathal fleet, massive and confident, moved to intercept them. Their ships were sleek and sharp, built like silver daggers that reflected the sunlight. They were certain of victory. After all, they had crushed humanity before. But this time, they faced something they did not understand, rage mixed with unity. The first shots blazed across the void. Railguns fired streams of metal at near-light speed, while plasma cannons burned trails across the blackness. The silence of space filled with explosions so bright they looked like newborn stars. Ships spun, shattered, and vanished in bursts of flame. The battle was chaos, pure and endless chaos. The Resolute Dawn moved through the center of the storm, firing with everything it had. Enemy fighters swarmed around it like insects, but Arya's gunners shot them down one by one. Alarms screamed, hull plates cracked, and sparks rained from the ceiling. Yet the crew fought on, each of them knowing that there was no retreat, no escape, only victory or death. Across the fleet, smaller ships rammed into enemy cruisers, detonating their reactors in bursts of defiant light. Human pilots, outnumbered and outgunned, fought with raw instinct and courage that no machine could match. In the middle of the fight, a massive Cathal battleship broke through the line. Its shadow covered the Resolute Dawn, its weapons charging with deadly energy. On the alien bridge, the Cathal commander, a tall figure of silver and glass, activated his comlink. His voice came through in a cold, mechanical tone. You should have surrendered, he said. Arya's lips curled into a small, grim smile. We don't know how, she answered. Then she gave the command her crew had been waiting for. Fire the Helios. The Helios cannon came to life with a deep, rising hum that shook the entire ship. Every light dimmed as power flooded into the weapon's core. A beam of pure, condensed solar energy burst forth, cutting through the darkness like the sword of a god. It struck the alien battleship dead center. There was no explosion, no debris, only light. The ship disintegrated instantly, vaporized into glowing dust. For a moment, the entire battlefield went silent. Both sides paused, stunned by what they had just witnessed. Then, from the human ships, came a cheer that echoed through the comms. Raw, fierce, unstoppable. The aliens faltered for the first time. Their perfect formations broke. Their commanders hesitated. Humanity pressed the attack. Ship after ship went down in flames, and the once invincible Cathal began to retreat. But the humans did not let them go. This was no longer a battle for survival. It was a statement. A message written in fire across the stars. As the resolute dawn fired again and again, Arya watched the light of burning ships reflected in her eyes. For the first time in months she felt hope, sharp and dangerous. The Cathal had thought they could erase Earth from the map of the galaxy, but now they were learning what kind of enemy humanity truly was. They were learning that when humans were pushed to the edge, they became something unstoppable. The Helios beam faded, leaving a trail of silence behind it. The battlefield was littered with wreckage, the stars themselves hidden behind the smoke of victory. And yet, even as the cheers rose, Arya knew this was far from over. The war had only begun to show its true cost. The battle raged on for days, and though humanity fought with all its strength, victory came at a terrible price. Half the fleet was gone, and the rest were broken beyond repair. The once proud ships of Earth drifted through the smoke and debris of orbit, their hulls cracked and burning, their crews exhausted and bleeding. The resolute Dawn was still alive, but barely. Its engines sputtered, its shields were gone, and its decks were littered with wounded soldiers. Captain Arya Voss walked through the medbay, stepping carefully between the injured as the ship groaned around her. The smell of burned metal and blood filled the air. Some of her soldiers could no longer fight, but they still tried to rise when they saw her. She knelt beside one young engineer whose hands were covered in grease and burns. "You've done enough," she said softly. "Rest now. You've earned it." The young man smiled weakly and closed his eyes. Arya stood, her heart heavy, but her resolve unbroken. Outside, the enemy regrouped. The Cathal were furious after their losses. Their pride had been wounded and they wanted revenge. From the darkness beyond the moon, their dreadnoughts emerged. Massive ships larger than cities, each armed with weapons powerful enough to crack continents. They moved together like a storm of steel, covering the stars with their numbers. Every human sensor screamed warnings as the fleet approached. In the command center of the resolute Dawn, Arya's crew worked silently, their faces pale. They knew what was coming. "We won't survive another wave like this," said her first officer, his voice trembling. Arya didn't answer. She simply stared at the glowing screen showing the incoming armada. The odds were impossible, but she had already decided that humanity would not kneel, no matter the cost. Then a new signal came through, broadcast across all human and alien frequencies. It was the voice of the Cathal Emperor himself. His tone was cold, filled with arrogance. "Humans," he said, "you fight like insects, brave but meaningless. You cannot win. Your world will burn and your name will fade from history." The message echoed in the silence of space. Arya listened without emotion, her eyes steady and hard. When the message ended, she opened her own channel and spoke calmly, her voice reaching the entire alien fleet. "You're right," she said. "Maybe we can't win, but we can make sure you never forget us." Far below the ocean, in the secret depths of the Pacific, Project Leviathan was almost ready. Its energy core pulsed like the heart of a newborn star, growing brighter with every passing second. It was Earth's last hope, a weapon designed not to conquer, but to take the enemy down with them if there was no other choice. The scientists and generals overseeing it waited for Arya's command. The weapon could destroy the Cathal fleet, but it would also scorch the planet's surface, possibly ending life on Earth itself. It was a decision no one wanted to make, but there was no one else left to make it. Arya stood on the bridge, the blue glow of the planet reflecting in her eyes. Her crew looked to her, waiting, trusting. For a long moment she said nothing. Then, with quiet determination, she gave the order. "If this is the cost of freedom," she whispered, "we pay it." The communication was sent, And deep beneath the waves, massive machines began to move. Energy surged through tunnels and reactors, shaking the ocean floor. On the surface, lightning storms formed, swirling violently above the Pacific. The Cathal fleet closed in, unaware of the doom waiting for them below. In those final moments, the people of Earth held their breath. Soldiers stood ready, families clutched each other underground, and every heart beat with the same thought. If they were to die, they would die free. Arya stood tall on her damaged ship, watching the stars one last time. Her voice was steady when she spoke to her crew. "Whatever happens next," she said, "know this, we fought with everything we had. We showed them who we are." The countdown to Leviathan had begun, and the fate of Earth rested in human hands. Across the dark and broken skies of Earth, every surviving satellite, station, and ship began to transmit a single message. It was humanity's final signal, carried through the cold silence of space and translated into every known alien frequency. The message was short, calm, and terrifying in its simplicity. "This is Earth. Cease your attacks, or courtesy ends here." The words echoed across the void like the voice of a dying god. For the Cathal, it was nothing more than empty defiance. They had heard threats before from countless conquered worlds. They laughed among themselves, mocking the human attempt at courage. But as they looked toward the blue planet below, something began to change. The ocean started to glow with an unnatural light. Vast storm systems formed over the continents, and energy readings spiked higher than anything their instruments had ever recorded. It was as if the planet itself had awakened. On the Resolute Dawn, Captain Arya Voss stood in the dim light of the command deck, surrounded by the hum of dying systems. Her crew worked silently, their faces pale but determined. "Leviathan charging," her chief engineer reported. 30 seconds to full power. The air trembled with energy, as if the entire ship could feel the pulse of the weapon deep beneath the ocean. Arya's gaze never left the planet below. She knew what would happen once Leviathan fired. It would destroy the enemy fleet, but it could also destroy Earth. Still, there was no other choice. The Cathal had left humanity no path but fire. She placed her hand on the control panel, steadying herself as the ship shook under the pressure of rising energy. "Hold the line," she ordered softly. "We end this today." In orbit, the Cathal fleet began to move closer, preparing their final strike. Their massive dreadnoughts charged their weapons, aiming directly at the planet. They wanted to wipe out every trace of human life in one brutal attack. But before they could fire, the human fleet made its last stand. Dozens of damaged ships, half destroyed and running on emergency power, threw themselves into the path of the aliens. Pilots rammed their vessels into enemy cruisers, sacrificing themselves to buy just a few more seconds. The sky turned into a graveyard of burning metal and falling wreckage. Through the chaos, human voices echoed over the comms, shouting farewells and battle cries. "For Earth! For the fallen! For all of us!" The courage of those few moments was brighter than any star. On the surface, deep beneath the Pacific, the Leviathan reactor reached its limit. The ocean boiled above it, turning from dark blue to white as energy burst through the waves. The Earth's magnetic field trembled and twisted, forming patterns of light that danced across the atmosphere. In every bunker, every shelter, and every corner of the dying world, people looked up and whispered silent prayers. The countdown hit 0. "Leviathan ready," the engineer said. Arya gave one final order. "Fire." The world stopped for a heartbeat. Then light erupted from the oceans, brighter than the sun. A wave of pure energy shot upward, sweeping through the sky and into orbit. It moved faster than thought, faster than sound, faster than fear. The first Cathal ships it touched vanished instantly, turned to dust before their crews could even scream. The wave spread outward, consuming everything in its path. The alien fleet shattered like glass, each ship dissolving into the firestorm. Even the mighty dreadnoughts, built from indestructible metal, melted into glowing fragments before fading into silence. The pulse continued beyond Earth's orbit, racing toward the farthest edges of the solar system, before finally fading away into the darkness of space. When the light finally died, nothing moved. The stars were gone, hidden behind a haze of smoke and ash. The radio channels were silent. The alien fleet no longer existed. On Earth, the storms began to calm, and the oceans slowly turned blue again. From the ruins of the Resolute Dawn, Arya watched as the last traces of fire faded from the sky. Her ship was broken, her crew barely alive, but they had done it. Humanity had unleashed its final warning, and the universe had heard it. When the light faded, and the last echoes of destruction vanished into silence, space grew still again. The stars slowly returned, faint and trembling behind the smoke and dust that hung over Earth's orbit. The war was over. The Cathal fleet was gone, burned, erased, nothing left but drifting particles of light. The Resolute Dawn floated quietly above the planet, a broken shadow of the ship it once was. Its engines were dead, its armor torn open, and its decks were cold and dim. Inside, only a few lights flickered, casting long shadows over the tired faces of the survivors. Captain Arya Voss stood at the cracked viewport looking down at Earth. The planet below was scarred and blackened in places, its atmosphere still glowing faintly from the Leviathan's pulse. Yet beneath all that ruin there was still life. Through the haze, green patches of forest and flashes of blue water could still be seen. Humanity had survived, hurt, but breathing. In the silence of the command deck, no one spoke for a long time. The crew sat in their stations, staring at the world they had nearly destroyed to save. Arya finally broke the silence, her voice soft but steady. "Status?" she asked. The communications officer turned, his eyes wet. "The alien channels are silent," he said. "All of them. They're gone." Around the room, people exhaled in disbelief. Some laughed weakly, some cried, and some simply sat there staring into nothing. The war that had nearly ended their species was finally done. Arya allowed herself one long breath before she spoke again. "Send out a signal," she said. "Let the colonies know. We made it." Far away, on Mars, Titan, and Europa, the human colonies had been silent during the war, hiding from the Cathal to avoid being found. Now one by one, messages began to return. "We're still here," came the first voice from Mars, then another from Titan, then dozens more. The survivors from across the solar system were calling back, their voices full of tears and disbelief. Word spread like fire among the remnants of the human race. Earth still stands. People came out of bunkers, stepped out of shelters, and looked up at the new morning sky. It was dim and filled with smoke, but to them, it was the most beautiful sight they had ever seen. Days passed, and the fires began to die. The air cleared little by little, and sunlight touched the ground again. From orbit, the planet looked wounded but alive, like a soldier scarred but unbroken. Arya knew it would take centuries to rebuild what had been lost, but for the first time in months, she believed it was possible. Humanity had faced extinction and refused to die. They had proven that mercy and patience were choices, not weaknesses, and when those were taken for granted, their fury could shake the heavens. In the alien systems far beyond human reach, the story of Earth's last stand began to spread. The few Cathal who had not joined the final attack transmitted desperate warnings to their allies. They spoke of a world that burned with fury, a world that had unleashed a sun to protect itself. In time, the tale became legend among the stars. It was said that the humans of Earth were not to be provoked, for behind their gentle voices and open hands lay a fire greater than any weapon. Even the most powerful empires listened when they heard the name of Earth. On the Resolute Dawn, Captain Arya recorded her final log. Her voice was calm, almost peaceful. "To whoever finds this," she said, "know that we gave them every chance for peace. We tried to be kind, to be fair, to be civil. But when they brought war to our home, they learned what humans are made of. This is Earth's final warning, and our promise." She ended the recording and looked out the viewport one last time. The sun was rising behind the Earth, golden and quiet, shining on a world that had survived the impossible. As the Resolute Dawn drifted toward the light, Arya closed her eyes. Around her, her crew watched in silence as the sunlight flooded the bridge. For the first time in years, the warmth felt gentle instead of cruel. The war had taken everything from them, but it had not taken their spirit. Humanity had stood on the edge of extinction, looked into the darkness, and refused to fall. And as the new day began, the light touched every corner of the wounded Earth. A promise that no matter how much they suffered, the people of Earth would always rise again. Their courtesy had ended, but their courage never would.